All right, so let's start with building out the whole scene. So let me go back to my reference. And so you can see that we have a wooden log on which the perfume is on. So we can just add a wooden log using Blender Kit. You can obviously go to Sketchfab and or any other 3D model website, and you can get any sort of models that you want. But I think Blender Kit has pretty good models. So I think I'm going to be using this. So something like that is good. Um, yeah, honestly, pretty much all of these are really good. Let me try this one. Yeah, I think this is the one that I was using in this render as well. I think it's the same one. But yeah, there's plenty of good options for you. And I think all of these are probably just photo scanned, which means that the quality is going to be really high resolution, and it's going to be good stuff. So I think this is probably it. Oops, my bad. Let me rotate it in the Z axis, my bad. And I either want to have it like this or like this. I don't know which one should I have. Let me bring it forward for a second so I can just inspect it. Something like that seems to be good, but I want to see if this side is better. No, I think this side is better, honestly. Yeah. So, oops, my bad. So let me go to the front view and rotate it just so that it is basically exactly centered. Sorry, it's exactly vertical, and scale it up a little bit so that the perfume bottle fits on it, and then GZ, move it down, something like that. So the perfume is basically sitting on it. And then we can obviously move it back. So I think that should be good. I think it looks pretty decent. The only thing is, I don't know about the quality of this log. I don't think it's very high quality. Let me just close this app right here because it's kind of distracting. I think this log was higher quality, and so maybe you can find something else. Maybe it was this one. I don't think it was this one. Okay, so the quality of these logs is not that great, and we can just also click this thing right here. Let me show you again. We can click this thing right here to open this menu, and then you can go to Blender Kit and search filters and free first, so that you can only see, so that you can look at all the free assets, because there's plenty of assets on Blender Kit which are paid. Oh, I think it was this one probably. Let me add this one and see. So usually in these sort of renders, it is going to take you quite a lot of trial and error just to see what looks good and what doesn't. And so I would recommend you to spend some time on this, doing some trial and error. I'm gonna hide that for now. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was this one. And yeah, I think this one looks quite a lot better. It probably wasn't the one which I used, but I think this looks pretty good. So I'm just gonna be using this now. And so we can rotate it in the x-axis. Let's see which side is better. This side is better because that's the only side we have actually. Scale it up, something like that, and place it right here. If you wanted to continue down, you can also duplicate this, Shift D, and you can just sort of move the position and just make sure that it looks fine. But again, that's not something which I want to do. So I think something like this should be a good log. Yeah. Plus, I mean, when we render it out and when we sort of add some noise and stuff, the low quality is not going to be that visible. So yeah, but if you really want something which is really high quality, you can also search for wooden log 3D model, and you can maybe go to Sketchfab or TurboSquid and just get some really high quality models. Or you can also use Megascans for this. But yeah, so I'm not sure if Megascans is free to use with Blender though, because it's free to use with Unreal Engine, but I don't know about Blender. So you're gonna have to check that out. Okay, so I think we are looking pretty good. Now let's go ahead and add some plants to this, some leaves. So I'm just gonna search for a plant. Let's see what happens. I think something like this should be good. Nettle plant. And oops. Select objects, scale them up quite a lot, bring them back in the X and Y axes, and I think these are the plants which I used. Regardless, they look pretty good, so we're just going to be using them. Before adding the plants though, what I'm going to do is that I'm actually going to go ahead and set up a camera. So I'm going to go to add camera just so that we can see where our camera is going to be, and so that we can only add plants there on those positions, right? So once the camera is added and selected, make sure to click this button right here to toggle the camera view and basically go inside the camera. And then what you can do is you can go to view. If by the way you don't have this menu, you can just click this button right here to open up this menu. Go to view and click lock camera to view, right? This thing right here, so that whenever you move your basically viewport, your camera is going to be moving with it, right? So let me select this and move it out of the way. And so right now the camera is basically what do you call it, it's horizontal, and I don't want it to be horizontal, I want it to be vertical. So actually I want it to be a square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to output settings, output properties, and the resolution X and Y is 1920 by 1080. So what I want it to be is I want it to be 2000 by 2000, just so that it's a square. Perfect. So I think something like that should be good, but I want the focal length of this camera to be higher. So I'm just going to select the camera, go down to camera settings, right? And the focal length is 50 millimeters right now. So let me bump that up to something like 80 millimeters, because usually product shots have a very tight focal length, because that just looks better, honestly. Something like that should be a good position for the camera. So that we can like see a little bit of the log, but the main focus is on the perfume bottle, and then we can start adding plants, right? So okay, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna be starting with this plant right here. Let me just add this. And so what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna unlock camera to view again, and make sure that the plants are like pretty close to the camera, so later on when we add some bokeh to this, some camera blurring, it looks pretty good. Because right now in this render you can see that the plants are actually blurred. Some plants are more blurred, some plants are less blurred. That just gives you depth information. But yeah, we're going to be doing that in just a bit. So I think something like that should be a good position for the plant. Make sure to leave some what do you call it, some margin outside, just so that if we move the camera a little bit in the animation, for example something like this, so that the plants are still visible, right? So just make sure to like leave a little bit of space outside. Next we can just select this plant and bring it here, and again rotate it like that, and just place it something like that. Okay, let me go back to my reference, and actually this one I might rotate it a little less, something like that. And what we can do, we can also right click here on this edge and click vertical split, and just click anywhere on the screen so that we can sort of get two viewports. And right now if I move my second viewport, the camera is also moving, so I'm going to unlock camera to view. So then, oops, my bad, I have to do this separately in every viewport. So in this viewport, unlock camera to view, and so I can just move freely, and I can sort of use this viewport to place the plants and this viewport to see how it looks. Another thing which you can do is you can press Ctrl B on your keyboard and select this region right here to only show you the rendered region, so you can have a good idea of what's going to be visible in our scene and what's not, because previously you could see everything and it was sort of distracting. So these plants, let me place this plant behind what do you call it, the bottle, and so move it up, rotate it something like that, and place it right here. I think something like that should be a good position. Yeah, make sure that you don't add everything in front of the bottle. Make sure to add some plants in the back as well. And I can actually go ahead and delete all these three and just duplicate this one, because this one's pretty big, so I want to add it to the back as well. Something like that. Maybe rotate it more, scale it up more, something like that. So I think the plants look pretty decent. The only problem is they look pretty symmetrical, which is not something I want. So I think something like that should be good to sort of, you know, just make sure that it's not looking too symmetrical. A little bit of symmetry is fine. It's actually important, a little bit of symmetry, but being too symmetrical is not good. I think something like that might be good. Now we can add, go ahead and add bokeh just to see how this is going to look. So just select your camera either in the scene outliner or what do you call it, just in the viewport, and then you can go to depth of field. And okay, So it's already pretty good, but the focus object, you could select the label, right? Now you can see that the plants have been blurred. And so these plants are not blurred enough. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to select both of them, move them back in the y-axis just so that they can be more blurred. And then I'm going to have to scale them up, obviously, because I don't particularly like the look of this. Maybe something like that should be fine. Scale it up, rotate it more. Yeah, so I think that looks pretty good. It does look a little symmetrical though, so I think that's fine. Yeah, that looks pretty decent. The only thing right now is, honestly, you could render it with this HDRI as well. I think it looks pretty decent, this render. The only thing that I don't like is the fact that it has very less contrast and it's like a pretty flat image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the viewport guide so that we can see the image better. And I'm just going to go to render settings, go down to color management, and the view transform is AGX is fine. It used to be, the best option used to be Filmic, but then they introduced AGX and that's just better than Filmic. And the look, I'm going to set it to high contrast. So you can see that it immediately looks a lot better. Actually, high contrast may be a little too much, so medium high contrast should be a good option for you. You can also go ahead and rotate the HDRI if you want. So I'm just going to click this thing right here so that we can set this to a shader editor. And if you bring this up, instead of object, if we go to world, that's going to give us the option to rotate the HDRI. This is the HDRI that we imported. Select it, press Ctrl T, make sure you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. But we already did that before, so then you can go ahead and change the rotation to whatever you like. But yeah, so that's how you sort of add plants, sort of make this render look good. I think something like this is a good lighting position. I think it looks pretty good. But yeah, now we can go ahead and remove the HDRI and just do our manual lighting as we originally planned to do. But if you like this HDRI setup more, you can render it as it is as well. So my goal was basically to teach you two different lighting methods, the HDRI one and the manual lighting one. So we're done with the HDRI. Let's move on to the manual lighting. So let's go to world and click this cross button right here so that it just goes away, and click the environment texture and disconnect, right? So that it basically just goes back, and we can bring this down. And so now what I'm going to do is that you're going to see that there's still some lighting in here, although we don't have any lights in our scene, right? That's because the color of the environment is set to a very dark gray. It's not black. So I'm just going to set it to black just so that we can have like a completely clean slate and we can just start lighting everything from scratch. So what I'm going to do next is that I'm going to be clicking add light, and let's add area light. I usually like to use area lights only. I don't like point lights or anything like that. I might use a spotlight occasionally, but like area lights are my go-to for any of these type of for scenes like this especially. So move this up, and now it's just a game of positioning the lights where they look good. So let me actually scale them up, something like that. You can also use S to scale them up, and I usually like to start with the rim lights first. So I don't know, that's just me, but like I love adding rim lights. So I start with them first. Rotate it in the x-axis, go down, GZ, and so that should be a good rim light. You can see that some parts of the what do you call it, of the perfume bottle are being highlighted. I can also move it a little to the side, something like that, and then rotate it. SZ to scale it up in the x-axis, and SX to scale it down in the x-axis, something like that. Again, this is just a game of personal preference. If you think it looks good, if you think what I'm doing looks good, and then feel free to copy it. Otherwise, if you think what I'm doing is not looking good, then you can feel free to have your own settings, right? So I have a little bit of rim lighting going on. The only thing I want to do is I want to increase the power of this to something like 50. oops, 50, my bad. Why can't I type properly? But yeah, so you can see that the rim lighting is pretty sharp now. So I think it looks pretty decent. Now let's go ahead and duplicate this light, Shift D, and let's set it. Let's bring it somewhere here. Actually, let me move it on the other direction so that we can have this cool effect on the back side going on. I think I like this effect quite a lot. And then what we can do is we can start with the front lights. So Shift D once again, move it to the front, but then rotate it obviously like this. Or actually, let me rotate it this direction and place the light somewhere here. And scale it down in the Z axis, scale it down in the X axis, just so that we can have a good key light. And let me move it up and rotate it down. Just have it face the perfume bottle. And obviously with this I'm gonna increase the power to something like 300, or maybe that's too much. How about 150? I think that should be fine. Okay, I do need to position this a little bit better, so maybe something like that should be a good position, so that it's basically everything is visible, but like again, it's not super bright, right? And let me duplicate this. Let me place it here. This one, the power is going to be 100, but the size is going to be pretty big because this is going to be acting as a fill light. Okay, but I actually don't like how the lighting setup is looking right now because this lighting is way better. So let's go ahead and make some tweaks and make this look better, right? So first thing I'm going to do is, now the thing is, from here on, it's all just trial and error. It's all just seeing what looks good and what doesn't. There's no set rules that you have to follow. It's just that if you know what the 3-point lighting setup is, it's basically a key light. It's basically, this is the key light, this is the fill light, and 1 or 2 rim lights. So this is the main, this is actually the main rim light. But yeah, so you can have you can follow that rule if you want. But again, if you don't want to follow that, that's perfectly fine as well. I personally just think that the 3-point lighting setup is just a good starting point, right? Then obviously you can from there onwards you can sort of modify your own lighting setup and you can just do whatever you want. So let me select the plane and let's see if we reduce the metallic, if it looks good or not. I think it kind of looks better, honestly. And so with that, what we can do is we can also reduce the power of the lights. And I think I need a general fill light for the whole scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be scaling this up. And I'm also going to be duplicating this right here. So I can basically rotate this and have the light come from the left side so that we can illuminate some of those parts as well, right? So okay, so far I don't really like how this is coming along, so we're gonna have to work on the lighting a little more. All right, so what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna be bringing the key light a little closer, because I think that's gonna light up things a little more, which is what I want. Another thing which we're going to be doing is that we're going to be adding, basically scaling up this key light, this rim light, and sort of just converting this from a, converting this from a rim light to sort of like a fill light for the back, something like this, just so that it lights up the background a little more. That's way too big, actually. Yeah, and so I think it's coming along pretty well. One thing which I'm going to do is I'm going to add a background to this. So the background, for the background, I'm going to be adding a mesh, which is going to be a plane. Also, the reason why, part of the reason why this render looks a lot better than the one we have right now is because this has been edited, right? It's been post-processed. And so we're going to be doing the post-processing as well in Luminar AI. I recently made a course about how sort of you can integrate AI into your workflow as 3D artists. And that course is essential for 3D artists because in it we covered a lot of tools which are sort of very helpful and which I use in my workflow every day. So one of those is Luminar AI, and you can use it to sort of edit videos for you. Edit photos for you, and yeah, you can basically change a lot of stuff, and you can also uh, just make your renders look way better. So that's something we're going to be doing in this course. So with the background added, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to add light, and this time I'm going to be using a point light because we want the lighting to be sort of like a gradient. And with the point light selected, just move it back, just move it near the, what do you call it, the background, and then we can go ahead and increase the radius a little bit, something like that. Increase the power, right? And so now you can notice that there's sort of like a gradient in the background. We can change the position to make sure that it's right in the center. And we can also then add a material to the plane, which is gonna help us make it darker. And so the reason why we're trying to make it darker is when we increase this power, actually let's make it a little brighter. You can see that we have a slight gradient in the background, a slight sort of spiral gradient in the background, which looks really good. You can also increase the metallic of this, although I don't think that's really necessary. And for the roughness, there's sort of like a sweet spot, I think, something like this. If you set it there, the gradient is going to look the best. And then you can increase the power if you want the gradient to be bigger. And let's just position it in the center, something like that. And I think that looks a lot better, right? So again, this image sort of looks a little flat. So I'm going to go back to my render settings and just set it to high contrast. I think that looks a lot better. And let me increase the power even more. Let's set it to something like 500, just so that the background can be a little brighter. And let me actually set the material back to, like, make it a little more metallic. Actually, never mind. I'm not gonna make it, because the thing is, if I make it fully metallic, then the lighting is pretty dull, right? Let me not make it metallic. Instead, what I can do is I can just go ahead and change the lighting a little bit. Maybe make the lighting a little less bright, or maybe move it back, something like that. I think I should add a little bit, something like that should be fine, just so that I don't want it to be overexposed. Also, one method to check if things are overexposed or not in your scene, you can go back to your render settings, and in the view transform, set this to false color. And so everything which is basically blue is sort of underexposed. Everything which is light blue is less underexposed, but it still is. Everything which is red is overexposed, and yellow is also overexposed, right? But if you see, like, you can see these gray parts right here, right? So if there's any gray parts in your scene, that means you're pretty much good to go. And so you're not that overexposed, right? So you can see that if I reduce the power of this light, more parts get bluer, and if I increase it, more parts get orange and red and yellow and green, right? So you just have to maintain a balance. Obviously, you can't get everything to be perfectly the same exposure. That would just mean that your image is just a flat color. That's not a good thing to have. But again, make sure that you have some parts which are gray in your scene, just to make sure that it's in the good range of exposure, right? So let me go back to AGX, and I think our scene looks pretty decent. I might want to increase the exposure of this a little bit, 150. I think that looks good. Maybe a little bit of this as well, 150. Yeah, and I think we are essentially good to go. Yeah, so I think the scenes look pretty similar. They look almost the same. The only thing is this has gone through some processing. This has not gone through any processing yet, so we're going to be doing that in just a bit. But apart from that, I think it looks pretty decent. We could also add some rim lights to the plants. So let me go ahead and show you how to do that. So just copy this light right here and just make sure to point it to the plant right from the side. Something like that. So you can see that the plants are a little more exposed and it looks a little better, right? You can also bring it closer for a more pronounced effect. I think that looks pretty good. Or you can do the same thing to this plant. I think this plant looks better because then otherwise this was like pretty dark, and this sort of gives it more depth, I think. But yeah, I think we're pretty much good to go with this render. The only thing I'm going to do now is Actually, we can probably just go ahead and render this and then work on the post-processing, right? So click render. Before that, I'm just going to go ahead and set the samples. Max samples to be 4,000. That's perfectly fine for me. If you have a slightly weaker computer, then you might want to bring it down to something like 1,000, 2,000. But then 4,000 is good for like this specific situation. Click render, render image. Let's see how long it takes. So it is going to take a bit. It's going to take a few minutes because obviously it is rendering 4,000 samples. But yeah, so actually one problem which I'm noticing is the fact that we basically hid this wooden log from the viewport, but not from the render. So I'm going to hide it from the render as well. And make sure that everything you've hidden in your viewport, you're also hiding it in the render so that it doesn't show up. Render image, let's see if everything looks the same as our viewport. It does. Yeah. And also you can see that the quality of the log is looking pretty good. I don't think it's bad quality at all, right? So yeah, we're good to go. I may want to rotate this a little more. Let me cancel the render for a second. Oftentimes it's when I render things, that's when I just come up with random improvements and I just stop my render and then just work on stuff. I think that looks better. I think the symmetry is broken up a little bit, which is good. There's a little more randomness to it. And yeah, I think we're pretty much good to go. I'll see you when the render is complete. Oops, my bad. I'll see you when the render is complete. And so then we can go ahead and work on Luminar AI to sort of Luminar Neo. I think they changed the name to Luminar Neo. We can work on it to sort of make it look better. If you don't have Luminar Neo, by the way, you can just search for it on the internet. Just search Luminar Neo and go to skylum.com and you can just download this. Now it is a paid software, so also even if you like can't afford it and you don't want to get it, don't want to use this software, you can use Photoshop, you can use even the photos editing app in iPhone, or you can use like any online photo editing software. It's just that the results that Luminar gives you are like far better than Photoshop in my opinion, or any other editing software. So I'm going to be using that, but again, it's completely your choice. It's completely optional. You don't have to purchase this software at all, right? So I'll see you when the render is complete and then we can work on it.